Blood trickled down Zara Blackburn's face as she crawled through the tall prairie grass, her body aching with each movement. The year was 1872, and Fort Kearney, Nebraska, stretched out before her like a distant mirage as the setting sun painted the landscape in hues of amber and gold. Her family's homestead was now half a mile behind her, but the pain they had inflicted followed her like a shadow. 3 years, she whispered, touching her split lip. 3 years of marriage and nothing to show for it. Her father-in-law's words still rang in her ears as clearly as the blows that had followed them. The Blackburn family had taken her in when she was 18, marrying her to their youngest son Thomas with the expectation of grandchildren. Now at 21, her barrenness had finally exhausted their patience. The sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. She pressed herself lower into the grass, her heart pounding against her bruised ribs. The rider approached slowly, the silhouette of man and horse stark against the darkening sky. "Hello," a deep voice called out. "Is someone there?" Zara remained silent, but an involuntary whimper escaped her lips as she shifted position. The rider dismounted, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. "I know you're there. I'm not looking to cause trouble." He moved closer, and Zara could see him now tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered Stetson pulled low over his eyes. He pushed it back when he spotted her, revealing a face that was handsome despite the thin scar that ran along his jawline. "Good Lord," he breathed, taking in her battered form. "What happened to you, miss?" "Nothing," Zara whispered, trying to back away. "Please just leave me be." The stranger crouched down, keeping a respectful distance. "You're hurt, bleeding, let me help you." "You can't help me," she said, her voice breaking. "They'll just come for me again." Understanding dawned in his eyes that Zara now noticed were a startling shade of green. "Your family did this to you," she nodded slightly, wincing at the pain the movement caused. The man stood, extending a calloused hand toward her. "Come with me," he said simply. Zara stared at him, hesitation written across her bruised features. "I don't know you." "Name's Ethan Aldridge," he replied. "I've got a place about 10 miles east. You'll be safe there." "Why would you help me?" "Because no one deserves what's been done to you," he answered, his hand still outstretched. "And because leaving you here would be signing your death warrant. Now, will you come with me?" Zara looked back toward the direction of the Blackburn farm, then to the stranger's offered hand. With the last of her strength, she reached up and placed her trembling fingers in his palm. "Zara," she said quietly. "Zara Blackburn." Ethan lifted her carefully onto his horse, a chestnut mare with a white blaze running down her face. "Hold on to me," he instructed as he swung up behind her. "We'll take it slow." As they rode away from Fort Kearney, Zara clung to this stranger's solid form, wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life or found an unexpected salvation. The journey to Ethan's homestead took longer than the promised 10 miles as they had to travel slowly due to Zara's injuries. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the steady rhythm of the horse beneath her and the secure circle of Ethan's arms keeping her upright. "Almost there," he murmured occasionally, his breath warm against her ear. When they finally arrived, Zara could make out the silhouette of a modest cabin with smoke curling from the chimney. A smaller structure, a barn, she guessed stood nearby, and a corral held 2 other horses who nickered at their approach. "My brother must be inside," Ethan said as he carefully dismounted, then reached up to help her down. "He'll help us get you fixed up." Zara's legs gave way as soon as her feet touched the ground. Without hesitation, Ethan scooped her into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "Save your strength," he replied, carrying her toward the cabin. The door swung open before they reached it, revealing a younger man with the same green eyes as Ethan but a leaner build. "Ethan, what in the—" The man's words died as he took in Zara's condition. "Bring her in." Inside, the cabin was warm and surprisingly well kept. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and kerosene lamps cast a golden glow over simple but sturdy furniture. "This is my brother, Gabriel," Ethan explained as he gently laid Zara on a bed in the corner. He was studying medicine before we came west. Gabriel approached with a basin of water and clean cloths. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her injuries. Zara nodded, too exhausted to speak. As Gabriel tended to her wounds, Ethan moved about the cabin, heating more water and preparing what looked like a tea of some kind. The brothers worked in practice tandem, exchanging few words but communicating with glances and nods. "Your ribs are bruised, not broken," Gabriel informed her after a careful examination. "The cut on your head will heal clean if we keep it from festering. Same for your lip and the gashes on your arms." Ethan returned with a steaming cup. "Willow bark tea," he explained. "It'll help with the pain." Zara accepted it gratefully. "Thank you," she whispered, her first words since arriving. "Both of you." "You're safe here," Ethan assured her, his expression serious. "No one's going to hurt you anymore." "They might come looking for me," she warned, her hands trembling around the cup. The brothers exchanged a look. "Let them try," Gabriel said grimly. "Who did this to you?" Ethan asked, sitting on a chair beside the bed. Zara took a shaky breath. "My husband's family, the Blackburns, we've been married 3 years, but—" Her voice faltered. "No children have come. They said I was barren, useless." She couldn't meet their eyes as she continued. "Today, my father-in-law decided they'd waited long enough, said he wouldn't feed a woman who couldn't even fulfill her purpose." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And your husband, he allowed this." "Thomas held me down," she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. While his father and brothers took turns, Gabriel swore under his breath, turning away to compose himself. "You don't ever have to go back there," Ethan said firmly. "You can stay here as long as you need." "I have nowhere else to go," Zara admitted. "My parents died in a fever outbreak 2 years before I married. The Blackburns were the only family I had." "Well, now you've got us," Gabriel said, returning to finish bandaging her head, "for whatever that's worth." Despite everything, Zara found herself smiling faintly. "It's worth more than you know." That night, Zara slept in Ethan's bed while the brothers took turns keeping watch from chairs by the fire. She woke several times, disoriented and frightened, only to be soothed back to sleep by Ethan's deep, reassuring voice. Morning brought clearer thinking and a stiffness that made movement painful but not impossible. Zara found herself alone in the cabin, but the door soon opened to reveal Ethan carrying an armload of firewood. "You're awake," he said, sounding pleased. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been trampled by cattle," she admitted, "but better than yesterday," he nodded, depositing the wood beside the hearth. "Gabriel's gone into town for supplies. Thought it best to stock up in case we need to stay put for a while." Zara struggled to sit up. "I don't want to be a burden. Once I'm stronger, I can find work somewhere, maybe in a town farther east." Ethan filled a cup with coffee from the pot on the stove and brought it to her. "You're not a burden, and there's no rush for you to leave. This is a big place for just 2 men. We could use a woman's touch around here." She accepted the coffee, studying him over the rim of the cup. In the daylight, she could see him clearly for the first time. He was older than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with sun-bronzed skin and laugh lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested a man who smiled easily, though he wasn't smiling now. "Why are you being so kind to a stranger?" she asked. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, respectful of her space but close enough that she could smell the soap he'd used that morning. "I know what it's like to run from something," he said quietly. 5 years ago, Gabriel and I left everything behind in Pennsylvania. Our father was a good man who made the mistake of crossing a powerful judge. When he died mysteriously, Gabriel and I knew we were next. "I'm sorry," Zara said softly. Ethan shrugged. "We made a new life here, that's what matters." He met her gaze directly. "That's what you'll do too." Over the next few weeks, Zara's body began to heal faster than her spirit. The bruises faded from purple to yellow, the cuts scabbed over and began to heal, but the fear remained. She startled at sudden noises and couldn't bring herself to venture far from the cabin. The Aldridge brothers gave her space, but also gentle encouragement. Gabriel brought her books from his small collection, while Ethan taught her to shoot a rifle just in case, though he never left her alone long enough for such a situation to arise. One morning, about a month after her arrival, Zara was kneading bread dough when Ethan entered the cabin with a serious expression. "Blackburns were in town yesterday," he said without preamble, "asking questions about a missing woman." Zara's hands stilled in the dough, her heart pounding. "What did people tell them?" "Not much. Folks around here mind their own business." He moved closer, placing his hands on her shoulders. "But they might expand their search this way eventually." "I should go," she whispered, looking down. "I'm putting you in danger." "No," Ethan said firmly. "You're not going anywhere. Gabriel and I have discussed it. If they come here, we'll handle it." "How?" Zara asked. "By shooting them. I don't want blood on my hands." Ethan gently turned her to face him. "There are other ways." Gabriel sent a telegram to a friend at the territorial marshal's office. "If the Blackburns come here causing trouble, they'll find themselves facing more than just us." "I'm still legally Thomas's wife," Zara reminded him. "The law would be on their side." "Not if they nearly beat you to death," Ethan countered. "There are witnesses in town who saw us ride in that night. Doc Willis, who came to check on you the next day. We have proof of what they did." Zara was quiet for a moment, her hands covered in flour as they rested against Ethan's chest. She hadn't realized how close they were standing. "Why are you risking so much for me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan's expression softened. "Because in the short time you've been here, you've brought something back to this place that's been missing since our mother died. Light. Warmth." He hesitated, then added, "Because I care about what happens to you, Zara." Before she could respond, hoofbeats sounded outside. Ethan moved to the window, his hand instinctively going to the pistol at his hip. "It's just Gabriel," he said, relaxing, "but he's riding hard." They met Gabriel at the door as he dismounted, his face grim. "Blackburns," he confirmed. "In the saloon, getting liquored up and asking about us specifically now. Someone must have mentioned seeing Ethan with a woman that night." Zara's legs weakened, and Ethan steadied her with an arm around her waist. "How many?" he asked his brother. "Thomas and his 2 older brothers," Gabriel replied. "The father stayed home, apparently." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. 3 against 2, I've faced worse odds." "This isn't a game, Ethan," Zara protested. "These men are cruel and ruthless." "So am I when protecting what's mine," Ethan replied, then looked startled at his own words. "I mean, I know what you mean," Zara said softly. Gabriel cleared his throat. "Marshal Dawson is a day's ride away at best. We need a plan for tonight." The brothers spent the afternoon preparing. They moved the horses to a hidden corral in the trees behind the property, barricaded the cabin's windows, and positioned weapons at strategic points. As darkness fell, Zara sat at the kitchen table cleaning Gabriel's spare revolver, a skill Ethan had insisted she learn. "I never thought I'd be readying for a fight," she mused. "Thomas always said women were too delicate for such things." Gabriel snorted from where he was checking the shotgun. "Thomas sounds like an idiot. Our mother could outshoot most men in our county." Ethan smiled at the memory. "She's the one who taught us, said a woman alone needs to know how to protect herself." "She sounds wonderful," Zara said. "She would have liked you," Ethan replied, their eyes meeting across the room. The moment was interrupted by the distant sound of riders approaching. "They're here," Gabriel said, moving to his position by the side window. Ethan took Zara's hand. "Stay in the back room. Don't come out unless I call for you." She squeezed his hand. "Be careful." "Always am," he replied with a confidence she suspected was partly for her benefit. From the back room, Zara could hear the horses stop outside, followed by men's voices, one of which she recognized immediately as Thomas's. She pressed herself against the wall, willing her breathing to steady as she clutched the revolver Gabriel had insisted she keep. "Aldridge?" Thomas's voice called out. "We know you've got my wife in there. Send her out and there won't be any trouble." Ethan's voice came next, calm and controlled. "No one here by that description, Blackburn. Best you move along." "Don't play games with me, Cowboy," Thomas shouted. "I have the right to reclaim my property." "A woman isn't property," Gabriel called back. "And from what we've seen, you forfeited any rights when you beat her half to death." A tense silence followed, then a crash as something a bottle Zara guessed smashed against the front door. "You've got 1 minute to send her out," one of Thomas's brothers yelled, "or we're coming in to get her." "That would be a mistake," Ethan replied evenly. "We've sent for the marshal." "He'll be here by morning." Mocking laughter followed. "The marshal won't do nothing. A man has rights over his wife." "And a woman has the right to live without fear," Gabriel countered. "Now ride out while you still can." The sound of a gunshot made Zara jump. It had come from outside the cabin, followed by the splintering of wood. "Next one goes through the window," Thomas shouted. Zara heard Ethan's measured footsteps crossing the cabin, then the distinct click of a rifle being cocked. "That would be your second mistake," Ethan called out. "I've got you in my sights, Blackburn. Your brothers too." Another tense silence fell, broken by the murmur of voices outside as the Blackburn brothers conferred. "This ain't over," Thomas finally shouted. "We'll be back with more men." "We'll be waiting," Gabriel replied. The sound of horses moving away filled Zara with momentary relief, but she remained frozen in place, waiting for Ethan's signal that it was truly safe. When he finally appeared in the doorway, his face was grim. "They're gone for now, but they'll be back." Zara nodded, her hands shaking as she lowered the revolver. "What do we do?" Ethan sat beside her on the bed, running a hand through his hair. "Gabriel's riding to meet the marshal tonight. Hopefully they'll return before the Blackburns come back with reinforcements. And if they don't?" She whispered. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Then we'll face whatever comes together." That night, with Gabriel gone and the threat of the Blackburns' return hanging over them, Ethan and Zara sat side by side at the kitchen table, a lantern burning low between them. "Tell me about your life before," Ethan said. "Before the Blackburns." Zara smiled faintly. "It was simple. My father was a carpenter. My mother taught the local children. We didn't have much, but we were happy." Her smile faded. "When they died, the Blackburns offered marriage to Thomas as a charity. I was grateful then." "You were young," Ethan said gently. "You couldn't have known." "I was naive," she corrected. "I thought marriage meant partnership. Instead, I became a vessel for their family line. When I failed to produce children, I became worthless to them." Ethan's jaw tightened. "There's more to a woman's worth than her ability to bear children." "Is there?" Zara asked, meeting his gaze. "Most men seem to think otherwise." "I'm not most men," Ethan replied quietly. The intensity in his eyes made Zara look away first. "What about you? Were you ever married?" He shook his head. "Nearly once. Her name was Margaret. She didn't take kindly to the idea of leaving Pennsylvania for the wild frontier, chose stability over love. Do you regret it? Coming west?" Ethan considered the question. "I regretted leaving civilization at first, the comforts, the predictability, but there's a freedom out here that I never found back east." He looked at her directly. "And if we hadn't come, I wouldn't have found you that night." Zara felt warmth spreading through her chest. "I'm glad you did." They talked through the night, sharing stories and gradually moving closer until their shoulders touched. When Zara finally dozed off, her head rested against Ethan's shoulder and his arm wrapped protectively around her. Dawn broke with no sign of Gabriel or the marshal, but also no return of the Blackburns. Ethan moved about the cabin with restless energy, checking and rechecking their defenses while Zara prepared a simple breakfast. "They'll come at noon," he predicted, accepting a cup of coffee. "When the sun's high and visibility is good," Zara nodded, trying to hide her fear. What if the sound of approaching riders interrupted her question? Ethan moved to the window, rifle in hand. "Stay back," he instructed, peering through a gap in the shutters. Then his posture relaxed. "It's Gabriel, and he's got the marshal with him." Relief flooded Zara as she joined Ethan at the window. Sure enough, Gabriel was riding toward the cabin alongside a stern-looking man wearing a marshal's badge. "We might just get through this without bloodshed after all," Ethan said, his hand briefly squeezing her shoulder before he moved to open the door. Marshal Dawson was a man of few words and decisive action. After hearing Zara's account and examining the still healing evidence of her injuries, he nodded grimly. "Assault is assault, married or not," he stated. "I'll handle the Blackburns. Miss Zara, you'll need to file formal charges in town. And if Thomas refuses to release me from our marriage." Zara asked the question that had been gnawing at her. The marshal exchanged looks with Ethan. "That's a matter for the courts, but given the circumstances, I believe a judge would rule in your favor for a dissolution." Ethan cleared his throat. "There's another option," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "If Thomas were to be charged with abandonment alongside the assault, the marriage could be annulled more quickly." Zara looked at him in confusion. "But he didn't abandon me, I ran away." "After he beat you and left you for dead," Gabriel pointed out, "could be argued as constructive abandonment." The marshal nodded thoughtfully. "It's a valid approach. I know Judge Harmon in Lincoln would be sympathetic to such a case." Zara felt a flicker of hope. How long would it take? "A few months," the marshal estimated. "But in the meantime, no one could legally force you to return to the Blackburn household." The conversation was cut short by the sound of multiple riders approaching far more than the three Blackburn brothers. "Speak of the devils," Gabriel muttered, moving to the window. "Looks like they brought half the town with them." Marshal Dawson adjusted his badge and checked his sidearm. "Let me handle this. You folks stay inside unless I call for you." Ethan stepped forward. "With all due respect, Marshal, this is my home they're threatening. I'll stand with you." The marshal gave him an appraising look, then nodded. "Just don't shoot unless I give the word." Zara watched from the window as Marshal Dawson and Ethan stepped onto the porch to face the approaching party. Thomas rode at the front, flanked by his brothers and followed by at least 10 other men some Zara recognized from Fort Kearny, others strangers to her. "That's far enough," the marshal called out, his hand resting casually on his holster. "This is official territorial business now, gentlemen." Thomas reined in his horse, his face contorting with anger when he spotted Ethan. "You've got no jurisdiction here, Marshal. This is a family matter." "Assault and battery are under my jurisdiction anywhere in the territory," Marshal Dawson replied evenly. "As is threatening a man on his own property." One of Thomas's brothers spat on the ground. "She's his wife. A man's got rights." "Not the right to beat a woman within an inch of her life," the marshal countered. "I've seen her injuries, documented them officially." "Now, you can turn around and ride back to Fort Kearny, or you can spend the next few months in a territorial prison waiting for trial. Your choice." A murmur ran through the group of men behind the Blackburns. Several exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly not having expected to face a federal marshal. Thomas's face reddened further. "She's mine by law. I demand her return." "The law also provides for dissolution of marriage in cases of cruelty," the marshal informed him. "Which is what I'll be recommending to the judge." "You can't, I can and I will," Marshal Dawson cut him off. "Now, are you leaving peacefully or am I making arrests today?" The tension in the air was palpable as Thomas glared at Ethan, then at the marshal. Finally, he jerked his horse's reins. "This isn't over," he growled. "Yes, Thomas, it is," Zara's voice rang out as she stepped onto the porch beside Ethan. Despite Ethan's protective gesture to keep her back, she stood tall, her chin raised. "I'm not your possession, I never was." Thomas's expression darkened. "You ungrateful, enough," the marshal interrupted sharply. "One more word and you'll be riding back in chains." The standoff lasted several more tense seconds before Thomas's older brother laid a restraining hand on his arm. "Come on, Thomas, it ain't worth getting arrested over." Slowly, reluctantly, the Blackburns turned their horses and began to ride away. The townsmen followed, most avoiding looking at the cabin as they departed. Zara's legs nearly gave out once they were gone. Ethan caught her arm, steadying her. "You were brave," he murmured. "I was terrified," she admitted. "That's what makes it brave," he replied with a smile that reached his eyes. The next few months passed in a blur of legal proceedings and healing, both physical and emotional. True to his word, Marshal Dawson arranged for Zara's case to be heard by Judge Harmon, who granted an annulment based on cruelty and constructive abandonment. The Blackburns, facing potential criminal charges, eventually agreed not to contest it in exchange for the assault charges being reduced. Throughout it all, Ethan remained steadfastly by Zara's side, accompanying her to Lincoln for the court proceedings and ensuring her safety whenever they traveled. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, moving from friendship to something more profound that neither had yet put into words. It was a crisp autumn evening when Zara stood on the porch of the Aldridge cabin, now as much her home as theirs, watching the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson. She heard Ethan's footsteps behind her but didn't turn, smiling when his arms encircled her waist from behind. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he murmured against her hair. "It is," she agreed, leaning back into his embrace. "I never thought I could feel so at peace again." Ethan turned her gently to face him, his expression serious yet tender. "I have something to ask you, Zara," her heart quickened. "Yes." "These past months having you here, it's changed everything. This place never felt like a real home until you came into our lives." He took a deep breath. "I know you've only just gained your freedom, and the last thing I want is to take that from you. But I need to tell you that I've fallen in love with you." Zara's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, you don't have to answer now," he hurried on, "or ever if you don't want to. But I want you to know that if you ever decide you might want a husband again, a real partner, not a master, I'm here, and I'll wait however long you need." She placed her hand against his cheek. "You don't have to wait at all." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I love you too," she said simply. "I think I have since that first night, when you found me bleeding in the grass and said come with me instead of asking questions or making judgments." Ethan's smile was radiant as he leaned down to kiss her, his lips gentle against hers. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I should warn you," he said, a hint of humor in his voice. "Gabriel's already calling you his sister. If you marry me, there's no getting rid of him." Zara laughed, a sound of pure joy. "I wouldn't have it any other way. You two are my family now, and you're ours," he promised. "Always." The following spring, Ethan and Zara were married in a small ceremony at the newly built church in Fort Kearny, a town that had once held only pain for Zara, but now represented a new beginning. Gabriel stood as Ethan's best man, beaming with pride as they exchanged vows. Life on the Aldridge homestead settled into a rhythm of hard work and happiness. Zara's garden flourished, Gabriel's medical practice grew as word spread of his skill, and Ethan's cattle business expanded with each passing season. 2 years after their wedding, when Zara discovered she was with child, the joy in the cabin was overwhelming. Ethan held her each night with reverent tenderness, whispering to the growing life within her. "You were never barren," he told her one evening as they lay together, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "The problem was never with you." "It doesn't matter now," she replied, covering his hand with her own. "All that matters is what we've built together." When their son was born, a healthy, lusty-lunged boy with his father's green eyes, they named him Daniel, after Ethan's father. Gabriel, now unofficially the town doctor, declared him perfect in every way. As Zara stood on the porch one evening, baby Daniel sleeping against her shoulder while she watched Ethan and Gabriel working in the corral, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the broken, bleeding woman crawling through the prairie grass to the confident mother and wife she had become, the transformation seemed almost miraculous. Yet it wasn't a miracle that had saved her, but the simple human kindness of a stranger who had seen her value when she couldn't see it herself. A cowboy who had found her bleeding and said, "Come with me," offering not just shelter but a chance at a new life. Ethan looked up, catching her eye across the yard. His smile, still as warm and genuine as the first one she'd seen, told her everything she needed to know. This was home. This was love. This was the family she had always deserved. And as the sun set over the Nebraska prairie, painting their world in gold, Zara knew with absolute certainty that her heart had finally found its true home.